Hello everyone, this is Professor Ataychik. I'm trying some new software here called Camtasia. So I'm not using the typical Integrity software here. So I'm curious how this is going to work. But what I want to do is a series of videos to help you practice some of the concepts from the course, microeconomics. So what I've got here is a labor economics question. And you're going to see it in Microsoft Excel, but I'm going to explain how I calculate these results. So this is your typical labor schedule, right? So we're doing performance management here. So performance management is also what we're doing here when we talk about evaluating employees and checking on how well they are working with others. Is it worth it for them to be hired? Okay. So what I'm going to do here is calculate from chapter 13, the marginal product of labor. Now in this example, let's say that we're using lasagna. We're just working with lasagna here. And remember how we calculate this is we simply subtract the contribution, the total contribution from the previous contribution. So that's like saying 10 minus 0. So I'm going to do this in Excel, but as I explain it, 10 minus the 0 gives us 10. Now over here in the first one, we'll put on dash because we really didn't have any production. So 0 minus 0, yeah, we could put a 0, but typically we like to put a dash, but either or would work. So down here, we're going to take 25 minus 10. So not this 10, we're going to take this 10 over here. Okay, so it goes 25 minus the 10 gives us 15. Over here, we're going to do 35 minus 25. So 35 minus 25 gives us our 10. And then down here, we're going to take 40 minus that 35 up here gives us 5. And then finally, we're going to take this 35 minus the 40, and we get negative 5. So as you can see from here, if I were to do a quick line chart, which I'll do here just to show you what it would look like, this is our marginal rate of marginal product of labor. Remember, the production function is a relationship of inputs to outputs. So inputs, workers, to outputs, lasagna, and it typically shows a chart like this, where it goes up for a while and then starts to decrease as you add more employees. So as well. So on the other hand, we've also got another chart here that you can look at, which is simply the total production. So that chart also shows, a decrease over time, but it takes longer because we're adding positive contribution. So the difference between marginal product of labor and quantity is, at some point we're going to be very concerned with when this marginal product of labor starts to slow down. Okay? So it's at 10 and 15, which is a nice boost. Then it starts to slow down here dangerously low. This employee here would not have a job because they're wasting production. They're costing us money. They're costing us production. We were at 40. Now we hired them. So in economics, purely based on economics, we would not hire them. Now, we've talked in class before a couple of reasons why we would still keep this person employed. Okay, so can you think of any? Okay. So yes, we would employ them because what happens if worker number 1 becomes sick? What if this is a woman who is having a baby and is pregnant and is now on maternity leave? We need that 5th employee just in case we have sickness. Maybe one of these students or workers is a college student and they're going home on spring break or winter break. So we need to have, it'd make economic sense not to hire this person, but it would make real world sense, street smart sense to say, what? Yeah, they're costing me a little bit of production, but I think it's better to keep them. Now, is there a secret sauce for that to figure that out? No, your individual company is going to determine that. Okay, so let's move on to D. Let's say that each of these is worth $10. So this lasagna, we're going to sell them for $10. Maybe they're Stouffer lasagnas at Hy-Vee in the frozen food case. Okay, so Stouffer lasagnas, $10. Okay, so here's what we do. We just want to note that it's going to be $10. But what we'll do is this is in Microsoft Excel, but we're going to take that 10 units, those 10 units of marginal product of labor, and multiply it by $10. Why $10? Because I just told you that it's $10 per unit. So this employee is bringing in $100 worth of revenue for our company. Working with employee number 2 combined, when they're boosting production by 15 units, multiply that again by $10, and we get $150. I'm just going to move this along here. And then the same thing here, 10 units of marginal production times 10. Can anybody think of why we're multiplying by column C here, why we're multiplying by marginal product of labor? Because that's what the definition is. The value of the marginal product of labor, right? So that would make sense. They match. Okay, so we're not worried about these anymore. In fact, we don't need this column anymore. We could actually hide it if we wanted to. Don't need it anymore. But I'll bring it back. So same thing here. We're going to multiply this 5 times $10. And then this negative 5 also times $10, because what is it really costing us when we lose some production? Okay. So now, and we can go here too, it'll be a 0, because 0 times 0 is 0. And now we need to figure out marginal profit based on this employee's contribution to the team. Keyword, their contribution to the team, not their individual contribution, because we don't know. Look at this. At worker number 2, these 15 new units, are 7 of them from worker number 1 and 8 of them from worker number 2, or are all 15 from worker number 2? We don't know. So we think about it as their contribution to the team, just like your industry presentations and other work that you've done in other classes when you've done group work. Okay, so marginal profit, well, since we don't have a laborer here, we really don't have a wage of anything. So we'll correct that with a 0. So now we're just going to subtract our value of marginal product of labor, which is another way to say revenue. So revenue, marginal product of labor minus the $80 gives us $20. Okay, so what this means is that employee's contribution to the team gives us $20 of profit. That's a good number. It's a positive number. So next one, $150 minus 80, because each worker is getting $80. This isn't $80 for all the workers total. It's each worker gets $80. $100 minus 80, $50 minus 80. Oops, did that wrong? $50 minus 80, and negative $50 minus 80. Okay, so here's how Chapter 13 differs. In Chapter 13, this employee would not have a job. Okay, they'd be out. Why would they be out? Because this number right here, highlighted in yellow, is a negative number. They'd be out. Okay. Now, in Chapter 18, these 2 workers would not have a job. They'd be out. Okay, they'd be gone. They'd be gone. Okay, the reason is these 2 numbers are negative. So Chapter 18 cares about marginal profit. Chapter 13 cares about a positive number here in marginal product of labor. So yes, even though these numbers are decreasing in their rate of momentum, okay, sounds like a physics class here, they're still positive. So they would still have a job. But this one here, it's a negative number, they would not have a job. Okay, so if I were to ask you what the total profit is, I would say you'd have to sum this up. Okay, so I'm just going to use a sum function in Excel. You would use this on your calculator or on paper. I'm just going to sum this up, and I get negative $50. Okay, this reminds me of when businesses go bankrupt. Like at first, yeah, we hire all these employees, we'll make lots of money. So if I were to ask you a question and say, assume that we had to hire all 5 employees. Assume that we had to hire them all. How much money would they make? Well, they would lose money. Okay, but what if I were to say, how much money would they make if they only hired employees that made them money? That's a great question. It sounds complicated. I might even ask it. How much money would this company make if they only kept or hired employees that made them money? Well, in this case, you would just sum up or add up the $20 to $70 and the other 20 to say $110. Okay, so that's how you do these problems. So that's without a fixed cost. What I mean by that is wage is tied to that employee. So let's take this a step further. Okay, let's get rid of these numbers here. And let's say that there's a fixed cost. So the factory cost, factory equals $100. They're simple numbers, right? So we're not talking millions. But the factory costs $100 a day. And let's say that this represents a day of work. So we can still do our calculation of marginal or value of product by wage. We'll just do that, bring this back, right? But now, if I were to sum up, let's say I were to say, okay, Assume that they had to hire only employees that made them money. So this brings back that number we just had. But now you have to subtract out the factory cost. What we would do is we would take this $110 minus the $100 of the factory cost. All right, the factory cost over here. So now this company, when we consider wage and fixed cost of the factory, is only making $10 a day. Okay. Again, these are simple numbers, but a great example into how to calculate this information. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned some stuff there as well.